All right, y'all. Hey, I just got to say, if you weren't here last week, you missed it. It was a fun time talking about sex. I'll just tell you that I was walking around Peoria last week. A lot of kids with eye contact right to the ground with me, just the whole time walking around. And so I thought that was so much fun. We're just going to talk about it again. Just kidding. We're not going to do. We're instead going to play a game. It's a game. It's called but this is a date though, right? So in college, there was a girl that I noticed. They're always over there, usually. They're around. This is a girl that I played football at a small little school, and this girl played soccer at this little school, and so I noticed her around, but then we had some classes together, and so when you have someone that you are interested in, your goal is to just find creative ways to be in their space. Find ways to be around them and move in. And so I would ask questions and have conversation. I found out that she was in this, not only was she playing college soccer, but she was good. She was actually playing on a US team that would play games 2.5 hours away. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I'd love to go sometime. And so what happened was she said, hey, I have a game this Thursday. Would you like to come with and come watch our game? And I was like, oh, sure, I'd love to do that. And so what happens is she picks me up. And we drive in her car, it's just me and her, we drive 2.5 hours to this soccer game. This is a date, right? Is this a date? Is this a date? All right, well, here we go. We get there, and I realize that her parents are also at this soccer game, and the plan was she was gonna have me sit by her parents. Is this a date, though? I think that this is maybe a date. We get there, and we had a great time. We were hanging out, we were talking, and we get there, and all of a sudden there's a big thunderstorm, and it's raining like crazy, and so the game gets canceled. And I was like, well, we're here, we might as well, let's go do something. And so we went and watched Toy Story 3 in the theaters. This is a date, right? I think this is a date. And afterwards we go, I'm thinking, we've been together for a long time. It's been 2.5 hour drive. It's been a 2.5 hour movie. So we go to the best restaurant I've been to, Applebee's, and we go there. And I'm like, I'll pick up this tab because this is a date. This is most obviously a date. And we drive the 2.5 hours home, and we're having a good time, and she leaves, and I walk home thinking oh, this went great. And because I'm this is obviously this is just the first of many times we're gonna hang out. And then she never texts me back, ever again. And I'm like, hey, but this was a date, right? And she's like, this was not a date. I'm like, what? My whole just experience just comes crumbling down. And here's have you been rejected before? And some of you were and I'll just tell you, in high school, my answer would have been of course not, because I was too afraid to ask anybody, so I was never rejected. But we often talk about, we're in this series called about dating, and often we talk about the fun parts of dating, the lovey parts and the fun little cute parts. But in actuality, when it surrounds dating and relationships, there's a lot of it that's difficult. There's a lot that it comes to being rejected by someone. There's seasons where you're in a relationship, but then you break up and you got to pick up the pieces because it's messy and it's difficult. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about dating from this context. It's not something we normally do. And I'll level with you. If this would have been a few years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, if I'm just being honest, 7 years ago, Jake would have just said, hey, you have a high school relationship that went bad? That's dumb, get over it. That would have seriously been my response to you. Why would we even talk about it? It's just a high school dating relationship, it doesn't even matter. And I think what I've come to realize is that the way that we've been designed, things matter to us. And oftentimes when you're in the moment, whether it might not seem like a big deal to me, when you're in the middle of a relationship that ends, it is a big deal. And it's worth talking about. And I think if you're a follower of Jesus, I think I'm just gonna share some things that I think are pretty cool with you up front. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, to me this is kind of a cool reason to maybe pursue following Jesus, because the reality is in the middle of our brokenness, whether it's from a rejection or a breakup or something else in your life, in the middle of our brokenness, oftentimes Jesus shows up in a big way. David writes this in Psalms. He says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. Jesus says this in Matthew. He says this, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And I think, and maybe I'll just speak to dudes for a second. I think guys especially, you and I, we have this thing, like when something goes wrong in our life, we have to like, oh, I'm fine. Like, I'm all right. It's okay for it to hurt a little bit. Like, it's okay to work through some of that. And oftentimes when we're in a season of pain and difficulty, we are most open to Jesus being next to us. And it could be a cool opportunity for us to experience a different type of relationship with God. And so here's what we're gonna talk through. We're gonna talk through something that we've probably all heard before. I mean, you guys are in high school classes, you've heard these things. We're gonna talk through just the 5 stages of grief. I thought this was interesting. And you could see this a bunch of different ways. And depending where you Google or what you look up, sometimes there's 7 stages. And here's what I'm gonna say to you. This is not like a one for everybody type of thing. You don't necessarily have to go through all of these things in order, but oftentimes this is what happens when things happen that are difficult to us. And it can be something that's really difficult, or it can just be being told you were just on a date that wasn't actually a date to her. And you go through this phase of like, wait, you're denying it. Like, I can't believe this happened. Now you're mad about it, you're frustrated. Then you kind of do this arguing with yourself where you're arguing, maybe if I did this thing or said that thing, then maybe this would work. And that's a scary place to be in. We're talking about more of that later. And then you can be in, it said the word depression. I just want to clarify this. From in the stages of grief, it's not actually talking about clinical depression. It's actually more talking about sadness. Now, sadness could lead to more, and here's my quick sidebar. If you feel like currently right now you are in a season of sadness and it's been more than like 5 or 6 weeks, I'd seriously tell you, you go find someone to talk to. Like, you don't have to keep gutting it out. Like, there's help for you available. And the goal is obviously to get to the end, and that is acceptance. That's what we're talking about a little bit. We're talking about that in the context of dating. So the first stage is this. The first stage is denial. And here's where I think you all have a friend, and maybe they're here, don't point at them, who is in a relationship, and the person they are dating sucks. Like, the absolute worst. You hate that person with all that you have. And it's like the worst. You get to pretend you kind of like them and it's annoying. And what's gonna happen at some point, because it's a terrible relationship, really just spoke to a lot of hearts there. A lot of you need to talk to your friends about if they like the person you're dating. That's what I would say. Like, get some feedback. What's gonna happen is they're gonna come to your friend that's dating this garbage human, is gonna come to you and they're gonna say, hey, can you believe it? This person did this to me. Like, they're breaking up with me. And you're gonna go, yes, I can believe it. That person sucked. They were awful. Like, of course I can believe they did these terrible things to you. And so here's what I wanna talk about. If you wanna prep yourself in dating to skip through this denial stage, I think it's vitally important that the person you choose to date is running crazy after Jesus. It's so important. We talked about this a little bit last week, and Dustin 2 weeks ago. The idea for us, when you're dating someone, the goal is that you're both pursuing Jesus, aggressively pursuing Jesus, and then you're figuring out if you can be around each other and you enjoy each other's company. And the goal of this date, the goal of dating is, hey, is this someone I can be married to? And so if you pick someone who's chasing Jesus and you have a clear conversation about expectations, like, hey, the goal of this is for us to decide if we're gonna get married, and you both are like, this is the plan, you can have honest adult conversations about, hey, this isn't working anymore. And you don't have to live in denial because that was part of the plan up front. If you're going into a dating relationship, fight like crazy to make sure the person you're dating is chasing Jesus. The second thing is this is anger, shame, and there's no easy way for me to say this without just getting right to the heart of it. You are 1,000 times more likely to be caught in a cycle of anger and shame post-breakup if you were having sex. And we talked about this last week. We talked about the idea that in a covenant marriage, that's how sex was designed by God, a guy and a girl in marriage, you're supposed to be united with one another. And so if you're having sex before you're married, of course, when you choose to separate, how much harder is that gonna be to walk away? Because it's way more than just physical. There's so many other things going on. We read this verse last week. It says, flee from sexual immorality. Run from it. Get away from it. I'm not just saying this because we read it. It's in Scripture. I'm saying this because I've watched hundreds of couples be dating and then stop dating. And I've watched the ones that were physically intimate, having sex, their breakups be way, way worse. The third stage, this is the stage that I think scares me the most potentially. This is like the bargaining stage. And oftentimes I see one of two things happen. And I'll kind of give you what I think is important too. If you want to avoid this stage, you have to make sure that you personally are chasing Jesus with everything that you have. Because here's what happens. I'll give you two examples of things that I see all the time. Oftentimes it's this. There's two people who are dating, and one of them is like, hey, I might as well keep talking about sex. Hey, I want to make sure that I'm not having sexual activity. And this person that they're dating is like, hey, I would like that though. And so then they break up with this person, like, I'm not gonna be with someone who wants to have sex. And so they're, oh, good, you're standing on business. But then what happens is, and it's usually a guy, 3 days later, texts the girl, he's like, hey, I was thinking about it. And actually, I think I don't wanna do that stuff anymore. And if you are not confident in who God calls you to, it can be really easy to be like, oh, he's changed. Because you were excited about this dating relationship. And you got suckered back into this person who's just been, and the reality is this person is being wildly flaky. He's not pursuing Jesus, and then he just decides 2 days later to start pursuing Jesus. Here's what I would tell you. This is very practical advice, it's not in the Bible, but I would say to you, if someone texts you that, hey, I've changed, I don't want that anymore, say, awesome, that's great for you. Talk to me a year from now. Let's see if this is a thing you actually care about. And if you're not chasing Jesus, it's so easy to compromise what you want and what you desire, because when you're dating someone, it feels good. And it's easy to just veer off track. I think the other version of that is when you break up with someone and then you get in that phase like, man, if only I would have done the thing that he was asking me to do. And we're willing to compromise our values because we give too much onus to this relationship we've been in. Galatians says this, and I just think we say these things all the time, but I think it actually matters when it comes to dating because it seems real and it's tangible. Like, am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Is it more important to me that I'm pursuing Jesus, or is it more important to me that this person likes me? I'm gonna go off script a little bit. Sorry, apologize. Can I just speak just quickly to ladies? I'll just say this boldly. If you're in a relationship with a dude who's asking you to do things that you're not okay with, kick that dude out of your life. Just kick him out. What are we talking about? Get him out of your life. Kick him out. Sure. And I'll speak boldly to dudes, this dude specifically. Hey, don't date dudes like this. I'm just being serious. There's a reality where there are dudes, I'm just gonna speak boldly to you. If you're a dude who is pressuring girls to do things that they're not into, you don't deserve people to be around you. And I'm sorry, I'm frustrated with that. But be better. Can you just be better? And I think there's this desire in all of us. There's this desire in all of us to be the thing that the people around us want us to be, and I would just challenge you like crazy to reject it. And it's gonna be difficult, but I do believe that it's worth it. This last area is this. It's this depression, sadness state. And I don't have a lot, but here's my thought on this. Isolation is a sadness multiplier. Isolation is a sadness multiplier. And when things are difficult, you usually have one of two options. You either will push people away or you will bring people into your life. And the only method that actually works for healing is the one where you bring people in. And I really do think, like, if you've been in something difficult and hard, it's easy to run away from this small group that you have. And I would just encourage you to stay connected. And I would say this, if those of you are here tonight at one of your campuses and you like specifically know someone who's going through it and they're gone, go grab them and bring them back. Go pull them back into this place. I'll say this is for free too, sorry, that's on me tonight. I think the isolation stage starts while you're dating. And here's what I mean by this. I think that there are some of you, and you know these people, who started dating and all of a sudden it seems like they just put on like the Harry Potter invisibility cloak thing. It's like, boom. They started dating this guy or this girl and they're like, they're gone. We never see them anymore. They don't exist in our world. And I think about this often. I want more than anything. I'm not up here being anti-dating. I'm anti-dating poorly, but I want you to pursue Jesus when you date. And I think the best couples, in my opinion, in high school, if I think that you're doing a great job, it's when you show up on Sunday night, I can't really tell that you're dating. If you're here on Sunday night and I can't tell that you're dating, that means that you've prioritized each other's Christ-like community. And you value it for them. And you're not pulling them out of small group. You're not pulling them away from their friends that are pointing them towards Jesus. And if you value pursuing Jesus in your relationship, you should be excited that they have friends that want to follow Jesus. And you should never get in the way of that. You shouldn't be pulling them away from those relationships. And I would just encourage you, if that's you, if you're the person that's like, I'm just here to be by them the whole time, like, I think you're just being a little bit selfish. Don't isolate yourself when you're in the middle of a relationship. Ecclesiastes, we talked about this last week a little bit, Solomon. He says this, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And if either of them falls down, one can help the other up. And pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. And it's hard, I think especially if you're talking about being in a relationship, is because you feel like you had that person. Like you feel like you had them. And then now it's done and it's over. You're like, where do I find that? Where do I find that person that helps me and supports me? And my encouragement would be like, find it here. You have friends, you have coaches, you have pastors who would love to be next to you and support you and encourage you. Don't run away from that. The goal of any season that's difficult is to get to a point where we're living in acceptance. And I really think the best way to get out in front of a bad breakup is to date really well in the dating relationship. Encourage you to fight for that. To fight to be people that are chasing Jesus personally. Fight to be someone who's making sure the people we are choosing to date are chasing Jesus. Fighting to make sure we're living over the covenant that God has for us sexually. And then fighting to not be a couple that just isolates ourselves from other people. I've had a chance the last couple months to do 2 different weddings. I don't normally get to do weddings, but I'm old now. And so I'm doing weddings of students who were in our student ministry like 10 years ago, which is scary. There's nothing like really that brings me more joy than watching people, students who have chosen to pursue Jesus on their own and then find someone who's also pursuing Jesus and then choosing to get married. I'm so excited for those relationships because they've worked at doing it the right way. And I look into their future and I'm excited about their future marriages. And that's what's at stake. It's worth it. I would encourage you, find someone in your life that's married that you would say has an awesome marriage. Get next to them. Ask them questions. Be encouraged. It's worth fighting for. What we're gonna do tonight in your small group is just try to be really practical. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna walk out of here, and I'm gonna encourage you, like last week, I just want you to assume that you actually wanna pursue a healthy dating relationship. That's the assumption in small group. And we're actually gonna put pencil to paper or thumbs to note app on your phone and actually like walk through what it would be like to build a dating playbook. What are the things you're looking for? What are the things you need to be doing? What are the things you should be doing to make sure that you've set yourself up to have a successful relationship whenever it shows up in front of you? All right, let me pray for you guys and we'll get out of here. Dear Jesus, thanks for tonight. Thanks for these students. Thanks for this dude up here. I'm sorry for pointing at him. That was mean. I apologize. Jesus, you're good. And I pray that we can be students across the valley that place you at the front of our lives. I pray that we're willing to have open and honest conversations about the relationships we're stepping into. I pray that we crave accountability, that we ask for it. Give us boldness to remember that the only affirmation we need is from you. We love you, Jesus, in your name. Amen.